And now I'm happy to welcome George Anastasopoulos here back into our studio for another episode of Timekeepers, where George helps you make better decisions with the time that we have. And now it is the new year. A lot of people have made resolutions. Often they're suggesting that they want to exercise more, and then mid-January rolls around and they start saying they find themselves too busy to exercise. Do you think you can be too busy to exercise? Is that a good excuse?
Well, first of all, Jessica, thank you for having me back, and it's a great question. So, you know, I'm reminded of a scenario with the doctor and his patient, and the doctor looks at his patient who is overweight and a bit unfit, and he asks his patient, he says, so what fits your busy schedule better, exercising an hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day?
Right.
Probably not a good place to be. Now,
what in perspective.
Exactly. So what does the patient do in return? The patient puts up their arms and he says, Doc, you gotta understand, I don't have an hour a day to spend on exercise. Did you notice what he said? Spend on exercise. You see, if we view time as an expenditure, spending my time, then we're looking at it as a transaction. I spend time, I get something in return for my time. And if I think about spending an hour of my time exercising, then what am I going to get in return? I'll probably get aching bones and sore muscles. Yeah, really, I want to be doing lots of that, don't you think?
Right.
And then there's the other approach, which is all about how to avoid wasting our time. So one way to look at it is spending, which is what I mentioned a second ago. And then there's the other approach, which says, what am I doing to not waste my time? So there was a recent research study done where, you know, people were asked to give up their cell phones. And when they gave up their smartphones, this is what they discovered. First of all, they went through withdrawal symptoms. And the second thing they discovered is, oh my gosh, I was wasting so much time on this. And so the doctor speaking to his patient, the patient might come back and say, but doc, I actually need to be sending some texts and checking my Facebook app. Well, the net of it happens to be that that's wasted time in a lot of cases, and those people who were part of the study identified it as being something that they felt they were even less in control of their lives when they were actually with their phones.
Wow. Well, when you put it in that scenario with the doctor-patient, it's more that we don't have time not to exercise.
That's a very good point.
So what about those of us who try to stretch our time? Does that work?
No, that's an interesting comment. You know, using that metaphor, and I've heard people talk about, you know, I'm good at stretching my time. Well, I got news for you. I don't know anybody who's mastered Einstein's theory of relativity to the point where they can change the universal constant of time.
You're saying we all have the same 24 hours in a day?
That's it. Not going to get another minute today. And so that's all we've got. And if you think about it, we have those three options. We can spend our time, and we're going to get aches and pains in return. We can try to avoid wasting our time by spending time on our mobile phones doing things that aren't particularly productive. Or thirdly, we can pretend or think or imagine that we're actually stretching our time, which is not happening. But instead, how about we look at this? How about we view our time as an investment? You know how we invest our money over a period of time, we get a return on that investment? Right. Same thing, except this time we're investing our time. And so if we invest, let's just say, an hour a day in exercise for a period of 6 months, now we remember there's a time frame associated to this. Well, what are we going to get in return for that investment? Chances are better health, maybe actually lose a few pounds, feel better, clearer mind, and maybe even more productive.
All of a sudden, the benefits outweigh any drawbacks.
Absolutely. So rather than looking at time as a way I spend it, maybe even waste it, or pretend I'm trying to stretch it, why don't we look at it as an investment instead?
Great. We're going to throw those tips up on the screen for you, George, if you want to quickly recap those lessons that you gave us here today.
Absolutely. So please stop spending your time. Just don't waste it. Good luck stretching it, but rather invest it wisely for great long-term returns.
You can find more from George at leadershipfundamentals.com.